business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. We certainly have a lot to talk about. Of course, we've had two different Democratic debates, one Wednesday night, one Thursday night. So we've had a chance to hear from 20 of those individuals, who one of those individuals most likely will be the Democratic nominee for president, and one of the others might be the vice presidential nominee. So we'll have a chance to talk about what transpired last night and what even took place the night before. Have a couple Supreme Court decisions that have come down. We do now finally have border funding, but I've posted at least one piece by Dan Crenshaw and then some other points and back and forth of some of the reaction from the most radical members of the House to Nancy Pelosi going along with all of that. So there's quite a bit to cover today, and we are privileged to have in studio with us Dr. Merrill Matthews. One of his articles from the Institute for Policy Innovations on the website. He's got some takes from the Democrat debate. And Colonel Alan West, and we also have his article as well. Not too surprised. Matter of fact, pretty much as you expected. But you've had a chance to watch those debates, which is pretty interesting because the last couple of nights and days we've had Van Taylor on, we've had Louis Gohmert. They said they weren't going to watch any of the debates, but it's obvious by hearing you before we started the program today, you have had a chance to watch those.
Well, I think it's always important. You go back to what Sun Tzu once said in his incredible book, The Art of War. You must know yourself. You must know your enemy. You must know the environment. And if you know all these things, you'll be successful in all battles. So I think it's important that we listen to the arguments that they present, even no matter how absurd they are. And as I was sharing earlier before we went on air, what really struck me was two things. Everyone in America is a victim, according to them.
That's right.
And so you cannot achieve anything without their help and their assistance. And then the second thing was that the moderators did not challenge anything that was said. It was just a free-for-all of progressive socialist left policies, ideas, and their agenda. So, at some point in time, they're going to have to face some scrutiny, and they're going to have to be before some folks that will say, now, just wait a minute. Let's really clarify this thing and talk about this thing. So I think it's important to listen to the other side.
Well, and that's part of it. Dr. Merrill Matthews, if anybody understands this idea of Medicare and Medicare for all, it's you. You've written quite a bit about that. And except for Bernie Sanders begrudgingly acknowledged, maybe your taxes will go up, but medical costs will go down. Mm-hmm. I didn't have too many people trying to even figure out how to pay for all this.
Yeah, I think my first takeaway from from watching the debates is that's 4 hours of my life I'll never get back.
Such a great line.
The second thing is, and going with what the Colonel said, the anchors just simply did not challenge anything. So Bernie Sanders comes out and says Medicare is the most popular health care system in the country. And Medicare for all is going to be like that. But Medicare for all is not going to be like that. Medicare, as seniors know it, the most popular health care system in the country, is going to go away under Bernie Sanders' Medicare for all legislation, because the term Medicare in there is simply a marketing tool to gain popularity. It is not what his legislation is about. And it was interesting how many of the Democrats, because I think where the Democrats are going to go is, I think Medicare for all, a la Bernie Sanders, is going to be the party platform. But there were several who pushed back a little bit and said, no, we don't want to get rid of the 160 million people who get employer-paid health insurance, many of which like that employer-paid. I get employer-paid health insurance. I like mine a lot. I would hate to have to lose it. But there are some who don't want to go there. But I think the party is moving much further to the left than some of the candidates on the agenda.
One of the lines you've used, and I want to hear Dr. actually, Colonel Allen West, and both of you to talk about that. For some, it's we want to push Medicare for all through the front door. Some want to have it sneaking in the back door, right?
No, you're absolutely right. And, to dovetail off what Dr. Matthews was saying, it's amazing that they're railing on the system that they voted for, that they said would be great. They're railing on the Obamacare system and how it needs to be bad, which lets me know that really Obamacare was just the means by which they could get to the single payer.
And I agree. And I would argue, going back to the anchors, not one of them pointed out that the system they say is such a bad system now is the system that Barack Obama and every Democrat voted for. Not one Republican voted for it, and that's the one they're blasting now.
The one that Nancy Pelosi infamously said we have to pass the bill in order to find out what's in it.
The closest you came to acknowledging that actually came from Joe Biden saying, I don't know if we want Medicare for all. Let's just take the program we already have, Obamacare. And it's amazing he called it Obamacare, because I've had a lot of people criticize me saying, well, that's a derisive kind of comment that you make about the Affordable Care Act. But he was the one saying that and saying, well, let's just take that and move on. But that was the closest you got to any kind of pushback.
The absolute closest. But, he still didn't take full responsibility of how this thing is collapsing. Look, the policies of the left can only really be instituted by mandate.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you had the individual mandate. You had the employer mandate. No one is going to freely say of their own will, yeah, I really like some of that. You've got to use some type of chicanery in language. As we were saying, everything's free now. Well, no, that's not the case. But in the end, what this is about is that second tenet of socialism, which is the nationalizing of economic production.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that you saw and heard over the past 2 nights, is that these people have to be able to control every aspect of our economy. And that's the exact same thing that Hugo Chavez said, that Nicolas Maduro has done, that the Castros have done, that the Ortega brothers have done in Nicaragua.
Absolutely.
That has the history of socialism as an economic model.
Let's see what we can for just a minute. We are going to really get a lot more into the substance, but talk about style for just a minute, because a few people have pointed out that, especially last night, there was hardly any laughter, any laugh lines. There is always a desire to sort of lighten it up a little bit, tell a story. Kamala Harris is a good storyteller. I'll give her credit for that. Mm-hmm. But still, it was just anger at a level that I think, for the people that are looking for red meat, the liberal, radical progressives, they loved it. But I think if any person in America tuned in, they go, really? I want one of these individuals as my next president?
They're not happy warriors. And I mean, that's just what it comes down to. And there was a lot of that emotionalism, but a lot of that angst, a lot of that edginess out there. And that's not how you're going to win people over. I don't think you can win an election on hating Donald Trump.
I think that's right. And you're right. They're not happy warriors. They're social justice warriors. And that's not happy. But you're right about the fact that there's no sense of levity or we've got to be able
humanity,
to humanity something.
Yeah.
And I still am amazed that the party that gave us Bill Clinton is lecturing everybody else on morals.
Yes.
Yeah. Another oxymoronic moment.
Yeah, you got to have a little self-reflection. We're going to take a break here, but we'll come back and get into that. But again, some of the more successful candidates, Ronald Reagan, even Bill Clinton, they had a humanity. You kind of liked them. You kind of wanted to be around them. Mm-hmm. Last night, it's like, well, maybe I'll put them in the Oval Office, but I would never want to have coffee or tea with any of these people because, my goodness. So we'll see. We'll come back. We've got a lot more to cover, and we have hours to do it in. Yeah. So let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Could it be that nearly everything we've been told about sexual orientation and gender identity is wrong? A new report published in the journal The New Atlantis seems to challenge conventional secular perspectives on these issues. A paper by Dr. Lawrence Mayer and Dr. Paul McHugh surveys over 200 peer-reviewed studies done on various social disciplines. Ryan Anderson of the Heritage Foundation summarizes the paper's results. He says the major takeaway is that some of the most frequently heard claims about sexuality and gender are not supported by scientific evidence. Here are 4 of the most important conclusions from the paper. First, the belief that sexual orientation is an innate, biologically fixed human property is not supported. In other words, people are not born that way. Second, the belief that gender identity is an innate, fixed human property independent of biological sex, so that a person might be a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body, is not supported by scientific evidence. Third, only a minority of children who express gender atypical thoughts or behavior will continue to do so into adolescence or adulthood. It goes on to say that children should not be encouraged to become transgender. They also should not be subjected to hormone treatments or surgery. Fourth, people who are homosexual or transgender have higher rates of mental problems, anxiety, depression, suicide, as well as behavioral and social problems, substance abuse, and intimate partner violence than the general population. The paper only focuses on the scientific research, but it obviously has implications for public policy. Incorrect scientific claims have been used to justify court rulings, government policies, and medical practices concerning sexual orientation and gender identity. They are not based upon sound science. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we were talking, of course, about style and substance, and some of the style comes from Bernie Sanders, but whether it's Bernie Sanders or something else, Dr. Merrill Matthews, let me quote you back to you. According to the candidates, apparently the greatest existential threat, after Donald Trump, of course, is the large corporations that employ millions of Americans. That seems sort of counterproductive. What's your thoughts?
And I heard that several times on both nights, that the real enemy, and I've actually I went through the text. Did I hear this right? And I went and looked through the text where de Blasio comes and says, those of you who can't make it if you're struggling and it's not immigrants who cause that, it's corporate America who caused that for you.
It's incredible.
And I'm looking at this, and I actually started working on a piece on this because I said, okay, well, which are the largest companies out there, and who hire the most? And you know, Amazon is the second largest, Walmart's the first, Amazon's the second largest, Google, Facebook, Apple are large corporations, and I thought,
not exactly conservative corporations.
No, not exactly conservative. And during the Obama administration, some of the tech companies, they had an end. I mean, they were the ones that the White House was listening to, not these others. And the interesting thing about this is I know a guy who was working a tile layer. He got a chance to go to Amazon, and he was thrilled. That was his chance of a lifetime. He doesn't have he's got a high school education, nothing more. Being able to go to work for Amazon was a dream for him. They think that's killing the American dream. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez led the fight to kill Amazon coming to New York City.
High-paying jobs.
High-paying jobs. And then the ExxonMobil is typically one of the largest corporations. Out there, if you're working for ExxonMobil, you can be a blue-collar worker driving a truck and making six figures. And I'm looking at this saying, how is this destroying the American dream? You've got most of these companies are very popular. People would love to be able to go to work for them, and they're paying high wages and good benefits.
The American dream for them is dependency, and them being able to dictate your outcomes. The American dream is not about individuals having, as I say, economic emancipation, economic empowerment. The American dream is economic enslavement for them, because that's where they get their power. And again, it comes back to what I said initially. They need victims. And the more they continue to tell you that you're being oppressed, you're being put down, like Bernie Sanders said, we need a political revolution. I think the last time they said that in Russia, it didn't work out too well for a lot of people.
Not too well.
But yet this is what we hear coming from these candidates. And again, they're angry. How can you say that a person that is going out and able to work and take care of their family, pay for a vacation themselves, that's a bad thing? I mean, I don't know.
Well, let's get into that, how you can even get that message across, because not last night, but the night before, Elizabeth Warren had one of the moderators say, the economy seems to be doing pretty well. I'm paraphrasing slightly. So why would you want to bring about a change? Aren't people going to feel risky about that change? And her answer was, well, yeah, it's working well for the wealthy people. It's working well. But I'm thinking the average person listening to this saying, I don't know, median family income is going up. I've got a job. Unemployment's the lowest in history for African Americans and for Hispanic Americans or Latinos. Of course, she called them Latinx. That's a new phrase we're all learning about, and all those kinds of things. So I don't know, how does that connect with the people if they look around and say, the economy seems to be doing pretty well?
7 million people off of food stamps, and those are the 7 million that Barack Obama put on the food stamps. The thing is, it's not fair. It has to, again, they are redefining the word fair.
Fair.
So
there you go.
I'm 5'9". I can't shoot a 3-pointer, but I guess I should be playing starting, guard with the Houston Rockets. I'm going to go down and try out for the Dallas Mavericks because that's fair.
That's fair.
I should be able to go down and be on a professional basketball team. It has nothing to do with my skills or talents, but that's the mentality. That's the stupidity that they have. And so the guy that's the third string quarterback that can't throw it, 10 yards, he should be getting paid just the same as Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. Or why does, Brady have all of these championship rings?
Tom Brady got all those rings.
Well,
how did that happen?
Let me just add that several of them pointed out that middle-class America had not gotten a raise in decades. Before Trump, you've had 2 Democratic presidents and 1 Republican president. So you had 16 years of Democrats and 8 years of a Republican prior to Trump. And they're the ones leading. I mean, they've got 2/3 of that.
Yes. Well, and again, just think about this for just a minute. Yeah, we got some students of history there. There are times when incumbent presidents are defeated in their second term. Jimmy Carter in 1980. But you had an economy where the inflation rate, for millennials, I have to talk about this because they've never been through that. But we're all old enough to remember the inflation rate, job problems, all of that. And then, of course, it was a little harder to defeat him in 1984 because the economy was doing very well. And Walter Mondale learned that the hard way. But then again, you had another defeat of an incumbent president, and that was 1992. But again, that's George Herbert Walker Bush, and also some compromises about taxes and the media saying the economy is really bad. Now, it's a long time between now and next November, but at the moment, the economy is doing pretty well. What do you do to defeat an incumbent president?
And the previous incumbent, I set Gerald Ford aside because he never was actually elected.
I almost used that. I used that the other day, and I left that off because it's confusing.
Prior to him, you have to go back to Herbert Hoover.
Yes, you do.
Who was beaten because we were in a depression on Herbert Hoover's watch.
Yeah. So that's difficult. I mean, and so in some respects, Alan West, one of the things you talk about is, again, this is such a great piece, and we have a link to the oldschoolpatriot.com. You don't even have to remember all that because we have it right there. Progressive socialism is all about feelings. So I've got to say, don't believe your pocketbook. Don't believe your eyes. Believe my emotions that I'm going to create. Is that what's working?
And that, well, it will to a point.
Yeah.
But I think that when people close that screen in the voting booth, hopefully we have Americans that will be deep enough thinkers to say, I just can't go in here and vote against my own goodwill. No matter how much you're telling me I should hate a person, all the facts are before me. And this would be like cutting my arm off. So when you look at Elizabeth Warren, fairness is a very subjective thing. Fairness is a very emotional thing. Political revolution, emotional thing. Every single one of them, even the stories that Kamala Harris told, they were all emotion-based. But I believe that the American people are going to say, we kind of been down this path before, with the storyteller, hope and change, rainbows, unicorns, and Skittles falling from the sky. And we saw where we ended up.
Yeah.
But the key element to this, and if the president is listening, sir, pay attention. He's got to control his message.
His message, yeah, his narrative. Yep.
That's the
for
key.
sure.
But going back to the point, Donald Trump has history on his side. It is very hard to beat an incumbent president who has a good economy. In fact, it's virtually impossible. We haven't done it in more than a century. Yeah. So he's got that going for him. And if he manages to stay, it keeps that economy going. If the trade wars and other things don't end up dragging down the economy, and they might, he's probably going to be a shoo-in.
And that's why the other thing you kept hearing everyone say, he wants to go to war with Iran. He wants to get us into a nuclear war. I think several of them said, one of our greatest geopolitical threats is nuclear war. Give me a break. I mean, President Obama gave, pallets of laundered money to the number one state sponsor of Islamic terrorism. I mean, we don't want to go back to that.
We don't. We're going to take a break, but let me just mention that we are in the last day of our fiscal year end. And so let's, if we can, hear from some of our listeners.
Oh, I thank God for what you're doing on Point of View. You guys have more influence across this country than I believe any of them in terms of tackling the issues and getting the truth out to Americans. It's getting to the point where truth just is bottled up on every hand. Every time you turn around, there's another big bottleneck against truth. I hope your listeners realize what Point of View is doing and supports Point of View in every possible way you can.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
I always wanted to give because I thought that Point of View really brings a lot of things out here in the open that you don't hear anywhere else. And I knew when I was hearing on there, well, I could count on it being something that you could check into it and the proof would be there. I didn't have to wonder, well, where did they make that stuff up from? I just know that it's going to be facts. That's what I call true journalism and putting the stuff out. I really think that's great.
Again, just an opportunity for you to participate. Going to take a break, but before we do so, let me encourage you to, first of all, go to the website, pointofview.net. Give now. We are in the last day of our fiscal year, so if you can help out, that would be appreciated. We have a matching fund, and that means your gift will be doubled. And most importantly, even as we go to a break, I've heard a number of you would rather talk to someone and put it on your credit card, so that number is 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Colonel Alan West, Dr. Merrill Matthews in studio. We'll continue right after this.
Have you ever lost a day? You think it's Thursday, but it's actually Friday? That happened to me this week, and now the week is gone. Well, almost gone, and there's one more thing I need you to do. Go online to pointofview.net or call us and invest in our nation's future. Not long ago, it seemed like every battle in government and culture was a defeat. Now it's a mixed bag with some big wins. We're making progress. Freedom is being given new life. The unborn are getting a bit more protection. Judges are looking to the Constitution, not just their party platform. A new day is dawning, and that means opportunity to help the light shine brighter together with Point of View. To do that, we need to hear from you today. Go to pointofview.net, click on the banner saying Morning in America, or call 800-347-5151. We've got a matching grant that will double whatever you invest. And today is the last day. Stop for just a moment right now and give. Pointofview.net, click on Morning in America, or invest by phone 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Dr. Merrill Matthews and Colonel Alan West. And for just a few minutes, we want to maybe move away from the Democrat debates. We're going to be talking about a lot of that in the next hour. But I thought it would be worth mentioning a little bit that I did talk about yesterday, but it deserves some more attention. 2 Supreme Court decisions coming down, and the first one on gerrymandering. Again, just to refresh your memory, in 1812, Governor Gerry up in Massachusetts actually created a particular district which was bizarrely shaped and looked a little bit like a salamander. So that's where the term gerrymander comes from, in case anybody wonders where that comes from. And the Supreme Court, in its inscrutable wisdom, at least ruled 5-4 that indeed when federal judges try to jump in and say that what a duly elected legislature does in drawing a district is unconstitutional. Basically, I love what the Wall Street Journal said. The Supreme Court is now telling those itchy judges, knock it off. But again, part of that, Alan West, for just a minute, is the fact that you may not like these districts, and you ran in a congressional district that maybe was a little odd, even in your situation, and some of these are so bizarre, I just shake my head. But the bottom line is, if you don't like the way the districts are drawn, you have an opportunity to defeat that member of your state legislature.
Absolutely.
But if you don't like what a federal judge draws, since they are appointed for life, you have no recourse.
You have no recourse, and I think that is a very important thing. We have to move away from judicial activism. I always say that instead of 3 branches of government, for the left, there are 3 branches of rule. It's the media, it's academia, and it's the judicial branch. And that's why they really try to go after that. And look, I'm going to be, everyone knows pretty much so what happened to me in Florida was that the Republicans had a supermajority in the Senate and the House, and redistricting was up after the census of 2010, and they redistricted me out of the district that I represented. So, I could have gone to a judge, but no, this is what, people decided there with the state senator, Dan Gates, who was the president of the Senate, and Will Rutherford, who was the Speaker of the House, and the governor at the time was Rick Scott. So, let's be honest, this is not something that is partisan. It is something that, is based upon the people that are in charge in the state legislatures. But this is why Eric Holder and the left are really looking at how they can flip a lot of these state legislatures, to include Texas.
Oh, sure.
I mean, remember Texas.
That sounds like your latest book.
Yeah. Texas lost 12 seats in the state legislature,
yes,
and a couple of months ago, Hillary Clinton was in Houston and said, we will flip the Texas State House.
Yes. Well, and again, one of the questions that was raised by the judges is it gets back to the justices. What is fairness? Oh, there's that phrase
again. That word again.
Does that mean that districts that should always be competitive? Does it mean that you could have some safe seats, those kinds of things? Mm-hmm. Because one of the most popular indoor activities these days, Dr. Merrill Matthews, is gerrymandering, isn't it?
It is. Mm-hmm. And to go back, I mean, the Supreme Court is responsible for part of this because they require a certain number of minority majority districts.
I was going to get to that, yeah.
So because of that, you can't, if it were me, I would just lay a grid on a state, sort of a checker grid, and just you've got a checker board here, and those are going to be the districts. But because they have to draw certain minority majority districts, that starts the process, and it opens the door for them to be able to do a number of things that might be a little politically motivated, but the Supreme Court opened the door for that. And interestingly, because you have to do that, because minorities tend to vote Democratic, you open the door for them to be able to say, okay, we're going to do that. But that means that a lot of white Democrats are probably going to be out because we have to open these for the minorities.
And that Voting Rights Act is something we're going to get to in just a minute, because that was the argument being used by the Commerce Department for asking about citizenship. But what about this? Because, first of all, I always feel like that's almost a little pejorative to say, well, the only way an African-American can win is if we have them in a particular district where you have a disproportionate number of African-Americans.
Well,
I'm asking this
the
question.
district that I represented was 92% white, and as a matter of fact, Palm Beach Island, the highest per capita income zip code at the time in the United States of America, was in the district that I represented. I mean, Rush Limbaugh was my constituent. Mar-a-Lago was in the district and so Donald Trump, in a way, was one of my constituents. So, again, I don't like this affirmative action thing where you cannot be successful anywhere unless we create this for you, because that plays to the other side, saying, okay, this is a safe seat for us. Look at Eddie Bernice, Johnson. Look at Sheila Jackson Lee, Al Green down in Houston. And so they just become rubber stamp, but they never do anything for these congressional districts.
And the way that's a problem, or that reasoning doesn't work, is because you've got Kamala Harris, a black senator from California. That's a statewide election. Mm-hmm. So she wins with a lot of white votes in there.
And Hispanic.
Votes. So you didn't have to if their concerns were correct, you would not have any minority people of color who were senators in statewide votes, because you wouldn't be able to get that done. But in fact, they do.
They do.
Yes. Let me take the other one then. And, of course, as we love to sometimes say, the Constitution is whatever John Roberts says it is. We used to say that about Sandra Day O'Connor, Anthony Kennedy. And this time it went 5-4 the other way, and it has to do with citizenship. And here's a good example. Dr. Merrill Matthews, let me come to you for just a minute, because this is a good example of where Congress decades ago delegated to the Secretary of Commerce, and whether you like Wilbur Ross or not, whether you believe a citizenship question should be in the census or not, if you don't like what was delegated to the executive branch, Congress can take it back. But nevertheless, at least 5 members of the Supreme Court, 4 liberals, and John Roberts said, nope, you can't ask a question about citizenship.
I'm mystified by this, because we did it for decades. We still do it on the smaller samples that they send out. And there are good reasons, good policy reasons for doing this. And I've pointed this out at times in previous times. When they look at the number of uninsured, the Census Bureau takes the number of uninsured out there. Because they don't ask the citizenship question, we don't actually know how many of the uninsured are here legally or illegally. So if you knew that there were 40 million uninsured, but 30 million or 10 million of them were illegals and would not be affected by, say, Obamacare, because it's not supposed to help illegals, it would lower that number, and you'd have a smaller number that you were trying to target. So there are policy reasons for knowing these kinds of things and asking the question of how many really uninsured people are there, viable uninsured, that is, people who are here illegally and could benefit from a new program. And we guess, we don't know.
And I will tell you that I really believe that this is partisan driven. Because the question that we have to ask ourselves in America, do we believe that our elected representation should be based upon citizenship or just a number? And, of course, there are people that want it to be based on a number, which is why they like open borders, because they will flood people into areas. And then all of a sudden those areas based upon population, well, guess what they want to do? They want to increase, which comes back to the gerrymandering, how these districts are drawn, which is why they want to take more of the state legislature. So this is one of those web of webs issues that is very linked. And it was interesting how the gerrymandering decision and this citizenship decision came down. So I think this is a very important thing for the future of this constitutional republic, a rule of law. Look, every time I go to buy a firearm, I get asked, am I a citizen?
Yes.
So, I think it's pretty important that we know that we have citizens here. And remember that there was a little vote back, I think, January, February in the House of Representatives that Democrats voted that illegals who purchase firearms should not be reported to ICE. So I don't get it.
I don't either.
So.
Well, the other reason this is important is because the federal government hands out so much money. If
And
the
that's what I
federal
was gonna
government
say.
wasn't handing out that much money, this would be a much less important thing. But one of the first complaints is if we do that, we're not going to have as many people recorded, and that means we won't get as much money from the federal government.
So a sanctuary city will be protected.
Yep. Well, and again, that's an important point because I've had some people say, why is this citizenship question such a big issue? And it's an issue because there is an assumption, and it may be a fair one, that if indeed you ask if you're a citizen, some people that are here illegally wouldn't answer it. So that would not only lower the amount of money you get from the federal government, it might lower the number of representatives in the House of Representatives, might lower the Electoral College representatives. So there's politics and money at stake in this particular decision as well. And as we pointed out, Justice John Roberts actually gave the deciding vote. The swing vote in the other direction. We come back, maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, but also Alan West was talking about guns, and there's at least one of these candidates that think you should have a license to drive a car. Why shouldn't you have a license to buy a gun? I got a feeling he's got an answer to that question right after this.
Proposals for single-payer health care depend upon deriving more productivity from a system that is already stretched thin. Medicare for All, which would nationalize the practice of medicine, already has 106 House co-sponsors. Under Medicare for All, doctors would be salaried government employees. Hospitals and other medical facilities would be expected to provide care for all their patients within an allotted, budgeted dollar amount, to be determined annually and capped to keep costs down. The pot of money will also have to cover the extra layers of bureaucracy we'll add to administer the system. This would rely on a resource that, under our current healthcare system, never seems to be depleted: the dedication and professionalism of doctors, nurses, and other medical personnel. Dr. Danielle Offrey, who practices at Bellevue Hospital in New York, says the current corporate system works because most doctors and nurses do the right thing for their patients, even at a high personal cost. In her New York Times op-ed titled "The Business of Healthcare Depends on Exploiting Doctors and Nurses," Dr. Offrey describes how this ethic is being cynically manipulated. Patients everywhere sense that the system is squeezed tight as it's streamlined for greater productivity. But, she writes, one resource that seems endless and free is the professional ethic of medical staff members. This ethic holds the entire enterprise together. If doctors and nurses clocked out when their paid hours were finished, the effect on patients would be calamitous. Today's doctors deal with more chronic conditions and more medical complexity per patient than ever before. Plus, we now have the electronic medical record. Dr. Offrey points out that primary care doctors spend nearly 2 hours typing into the EMR for every 1 hour of direct patient care. Right now, she writes, in healthcare, there is a wondrous elasticity. You can keep adding work, and magically it all somehow gets done. Medicare for All will rely on this quality and stretch it to the breaking point. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
A couple issues on the table, and then we'll come back to the Democratic debate in the next hour. But Dr. Merrill Matthews, let me come to you for just a minute, because one of the articles, which I love here, comes from our good friends there at National Review, and it's called The Contradictions of John Roberts. And we can go on and on and on, but you've studied this. I remember you wrote an article a number of years ago in which you looked at those individuals that flipped, and they almost always tended to be conservative, or at least those appointed by Republican presidents.
Right. There are no liberal swing votes. It's always somebody in the Republican/conservative side. And so when Anthony Kennedy was stepping down, the question was who would be the next swing vote. Nobody said said, well, it might be Sotomayor or something like that. It was probably going to be John Roberts. That's the natural thing. And of course, John Roberts has actually fulfilled their wishes on Obamacare,
yes,
and on this, and several other cases. And the interesting thing about this is that I keep reading stories that John Roberts wants to have on major issues. He wants to have larger majorities than just the 5-4. I understand that. They want to do that in Brown versus Board of Education. Having said that, if it's going to be 5-4, why go with the liberals? I'm not. If you know it's going to be 5-4, just go with the conservatives then.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I just put that one on the table. The one I wanted to get to is almost every time I have Colonel Alan West on, you've been in the news a lot talking about the NRA, and you can talk about that or not. But I did want to relate back to this issue, and that is Cory Booker the other night made the argument that you need a license to drive a car. So he wants to make sure that you have to get a license to have and purchase a firearm. And you just pointed out a minute ago, they ask you if you're a citizen. I've purchased firearms and rifles and shotguns and everything. By the way, won a shotgun shooting contest recently, so that was kind of fun. But the bottom line is he thinks we all should fill out a license and get an application for a Second Amendment.
This is where the real crux of the issue is in America. The left has an ideological agenda, and everything that aligns with their ideological agenda is a right.
Right.
But then you have constitutional rights. But those constitutional rights that don't align with their ideological agenda is not a right.
Not a right.
So, you have to go to them to beg for permission, which means that, can I please be able to have a firearm to defend myself, even though it says that there in the Second Amendment that you have this individual right. That's dismissed. What folks need to understand is this country was started because of gun control. April 19, 1775, when the British marched inland toward Concord, Massachusetts, they were going to destroy a weapons armaments factory.
Mm-hmm.
There was no Army. There was no Navy, Marine Corps. There was no United States of America. There were armed citizens who came out and said no. And that is the thing that they do not ever want to have. One of the first things that Hugo Chavez did in Venezuela was to ban private gun ownership with the excuse of, I'm going to curtail gun violence. Exact same thing you heard these past 2 nights. I don't need to go to Cory Booker to beg his permission to be able to have my constitutional right. But in their beady little brains, that's what they think has to happen. And that's the tyrannical nature of who they are. And one of the most disingenuous things from the debate was Cory Booker talking about how sad he felt when he heard, gunfire going off in his city of Newark, where he used to be the mayor.
He was the mayor.
Most stringent gun control laws are in New Jersey. So who does he think are the ones out there shooting? Not law-abiding citizens, because they abide by the law and they can't get a weapon. And as a matter of fact, New Jersey tells them how many bullets they can have in a weapon. But nothing happens with the criminals. And so, again, this is the tyrannical nature of people like Spartacus and the rest of them. We saw Eric Swalwell talk about we're going to have a mandatory gun buyback program.
There was another one, yeah.
Well, in Iraq, Paul Bremer said we need to have a gun buyback program with the Iraqis. That didn't work out so well, and it won't work out well here. But Swalwell believes that if you don't participate in it, then you're a violator of the law. This is a very interesting situation, very dangerous proposal. We don't need to have a privilege for our constitutional right.
And if the media had not been lapdogs in this case, then the follow-up question would have been, so what you're saying, Mr. Booker, is that there are no criminals or crazy people who have driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be a good one. The other question that might be asked of an Eric Swalwell or even a Kamala Harris, okay, you're in California. You have and also some of the most restrictive as a state. Most people think that may be even more restrictive than New Jersey, but I won't argue which is 49th or 50th, but it's most restrictive. And there you've had a number of shootings. Mm-hmm. And so what, in addition to all the laws you have in New Jersey or California, would you implement to change that, since you have some of the most restrictive laws already?
Kate Steinle was shot by a criminal illegal immigrant that had been deported 5 times, and that individual was set free. he was not even found guilty of the illegal possession of a firearm. Now, that's California. Officer Ranil Singh was gunned down by a criminal illegal immigrant gang member who had a firearm. So don't tell me that the problem is Kerby, Merrill, Allen, legal, law-abiding gun owners. The problem is what, like you said, people that are criminals, people that have mental illness that somehow get access to these weapons.
And we just see that in Chicago, where so many homicides are going on, and this is usually gang violence, and these are people with guns.
Yeah.
These are criminals with guns.
Well, if nothing else, we're going to be hearing about the NRA. That was another one of those existential threats to the culture as well. And in case people don't remember, this man has been on the board of the NRA and said a few things about that as well. So if nothing else, those are a couple of issues we put on the table. When we come back, though, we do want to spend some time talking about the Democratic debates. But Colonel Allen West, for just a minute, let's talk about the fact that we are looking for people to support this ministry before the end of our fiscal year. Any thoughts that you might pass on to our listeners?
If you think about it, if point of view is taken away from the marketplace, the left will be so very happy because this is an incredible opportunity for Christian constitutional conservatives to discuss the issues from a biblical perspective. And I think that it is very rare that you find that. And if we don't understand what you just saw with the First Liberty decision on the Bladensburg Cross, there is a real true drive to secular humanism, government with the little g overpowering God with the big G. So please support Point of View Ministries and Kerby and all the great people that are here, because they are truly doing the Lord's work. And the fact that you have such an intellectual powerhouse like Dr. Merrill Matthews here, this is what we need. This is what we have to be able to do, find our space where we can talk about these issues.
Dr. Merrill Matthews, you've been with us for many decades. So
Going back in the early 90s.
So really good as well. Let's take a break then. And one of the things I would encourage you to do, because you don't want to miss out this robust debate and discussion we're going to be having about the debates that took place on Wednesday night and Thursday night. And we've already looked a little bit at some of those very important Supreme Court decisions. This would be a great time to go to the website, pointofview.net, and you can click on that button that says Morning in America, because there have been a lot of very positive things we've been talking about over this last few weeks. And so click on that button that says Give Now. We have a matching fund. I know some of you might say, I'm old school, and I am. My wife wrote the check the other day for Point of View, and I brought it in here. So if you say, well, I'd rather write a check, that's just fine, too. Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. Again, just make it out to Point of View, Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. If you can put it in the mail today, that'd be really helpful, and it'll count towards the match. And then most importantly, I think there are always a number of you that said, I can just pick up the phone and just 2 minutes take care of this, and you certainly can. And that pledge line number, that order line number is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Dr. Merrill Matthews, Colonel Allen West will be with us as we talk about the debate right after this.
Have you ever lost a day? You think it's Thursday, but it's actually Friday? That happened to me this week, and now the week is gone. Well, almost gone, and there's one more thing I need you to do. Go online to pointofview.net or call us and invest in our nation's future. Not long ago, it seemed like every battle in government and culture was a defeat. Now it's a mixed bag with some big wins. We're making progress. Freedom is being given new life. The unborn are getting a bit more protection. Judges are looking to the Constitution, not just their party platform. A new day is dawning, and that means opportunity to help the light shine brighter together with Point of View. To do that, we need to hear from you today. Go to pointofview.net, click on the banner saying Morning in America, or call 800-347-5151. We've got a matching grant that will double whatever you invest. And today is the last day. Stop for just a moment right now and give. Pointofview.net, click on Morning in America, or invest by phone 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is our weekend edition, and this is just going to be a great opportunity to hear from two guests that we have in studio with us today. Colonel Allen West, author, speaker, and a former member of Congress. We also have Dr. Merrill Matthews, the resident scholar at the Institute for Policy Innovation. Of course, we've had two debates by Democratic candidates, one on Wednesday, June 26th, one on Thursday, June 27th. I know they are loaded to bear with all sorts of comments. We have a very good piece by Dr. Merrill Matthews, which we'll talk about a little bit later, on health care transparency. And the other day we were talking about Stephen Moore, who was supposed to get rotator cuff surgery, and so we asked the doctor how much it would cost, and the doctor looked confused and said, "Steve, I've been doing surgery for 20 years, and you're the first patient to ever ask me what it costs." And then he thought about it and says, "And I don't know what it costs." So, of course, now the president's talking about health care transparency, so we'll be talking about that with Dr. Merrill Matthews. And if you love Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, you will love all the things that he posts on his website. And one of those is, by the way, the website, theoldschoolpatriot.com. He said the Democratic debate kind of went as expected. And a little bit later, we might also talk about some of those Supreme Court cases that we talked about yesterday and get into those as well. But Colonel Allen West, let me start with you. These last two nights, in some respects, you say just what you kind of expected. It was high on emotion and victimology, kind of low on content. And the big question I think some people may have is, how are you going to pay for all this?
Well, that's the whole point. It's not about how you're going to pay for it. It comes down to, don't you care? You have to be compassionate. It's about fairness. As Elizabeth Warren said, the economy is not fair. You kept hearing people say we need an economy that works for everyone. Well, how are you going to have an economy that works for everyone? I'm sorry, but there are different stratas of skills and abilities and capabilities in the world. And so, that differentiates us. I mean, that's kind of how God made us all. So, what you heard, like I said, it is all about, we need victims. We've got to have victims. You cannot be successful. This economy is not working for you. Turn it over to us, and we will make sure that everyone is taken care of. And that's the same rhetoric that we heard in a place called Venezuela. We've heard in, several other places, and it never ends up well.
Who's going to make us the victims? It seems to me one of the things you say in one of your pieces, Dr. Merrill Matthews, is apparently corporations are, apparently big pharma is, insurance companies, and the fossil fuel industry. Of course, that sounds a lot like Bernie Sanders, but some of the others were saying some of the same things. And so the bad guys are all these big companies that provide a lot of the jobs for the listeners.
That provide a lot of the high-paying jobs out there. I mean, Amazon is so bad that once it decided to go to New York, they started a movement with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to stop it from coming there. If you were hoping for one of those good high-paying jobs at Amazon, and they hire a range of, unlike say Apple or something like that, where you're generally going to be tech people, high-end, you're college-educated tech people. Amazon hires from low skills to high skills, blue-collar to white-collar. They hire the whole range. They pay well for it, provide very good benefits. And a lot of Americans would love to have the chance to be able to go to work for Amazon, and yet that's one of their target companies that they don't like, even though it's apparently the second largest employer after Walmart in the country.
One of the questions I certainly want to put on the table is whether or not we should be providing full medical care for people that are here illegally. Colonel Alan West, you've thought about that as a member of Congress. They asked that question last night, and I think all 10 hands went up.
Yeah, all 10 last night, and no. You know, to me, the most important question that needs to be asked to anyone who wants to be a presidential, candidate: do you believe in the sovereignty of the United States of America?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that we are a constitutional republic, and do you understand and support our rule of law? Because if you think that anyone can just come into the United States of America, that we should have open borders and we should be providing all of these taxpayer-funded benefits, citizens' benefits, to people here illegally, then I think that disqualifies you from being a candidate for the United States of America. How can you be the president of something that you don't even believe should exist? And so when I think about these people that are raising their hands, talking about everything they're going to give to illegal immigrants, then what happens to veterans? What happens to seniors? What happens to all of these other people, all of these Americans, especially veterans, people that put their lives on the line for this country? When you tell them, okay, move to the back, we're going to put these people ahead of you because our ideological agenda takes precedence over you. So, those 10 people that raise their hands, eliminate them.
The amazing thing about this is, I don't know that any of the Democratic candidates know this, but we actually have a federal law we call them EMTALA. And if you show up at a hospital that takes Medicare or Medicaid, and virtually every hospital does,
yes.
you have to take these people through in the emergency room. And I think that's just something they do. Doesn't mean you get a heart transplant. Doesn't mean you get artificial limbs or a hip transplant or something like that, but they have to take you and they provide medical care, and the hospital is allowed to try to collect from you, but if you can't collect, the hospital doesn't collect anything. That goes on. So as a statutory right, people have the ability, regardless of their status, to go to the hospital and get care. A lot of illegal women go to the hospital and have babies there. That goes on right now. What they're talking about is providing a full range of health insurance benefits, which, interestingly, because California just had this debate, and Gavin Newsom, I believe it was, wanted to limit it to children under illegal immigrants who are children under age 18, I believe it was, and some of the Democrats said, no, let's do it to everybody. So it sort of makes Gavin Newsom on the right of an awful lot of the people out there, because he said we just can't afford all of that. But at any rate, they're already moving in that direction. Some of the states.
It's interesting because down in South Florida, it was Stewart, Florida, Martin County. The Martin County Hospital, it was on the verge of a near bankruptcy because of illegal immigrants that they were providing the full panoply to, and one gentleman had been in a coma for quite some time, and finally they treated him. He came out of the coma and everything, and they went to of course process him to go back to his country of origin. He sued the hospital for turning him over to the immigration officials. This is insane, those type of stories that are out there.
When we come back from the break, I want to get your comments about the moderators who in most cases didn't really have a follow-up question. But one that they did, and I want to get into that as well, is to ask people like Bernie Sanders and a few others, you've tried this kind of Medicare for all type of thing in California and Vermont. It hasn't worked there, so why would you think that would work at the national level? But I'd love to get both of your comments about the kinds of questions that were asked and the lack of follow-up. Since I'm kind of in the business of asking questions, sometimes I paid as much attention to what the moderators asked or didn't ask and what they didn't follow up on, and I'd love to get your thoughts about that. But also just if it's not working at the state, why do you want to expand it to the federal government? So we've got a lot to cover in terms of the debate and all sorts of great articles for you to find on the website, pointofview.net. Of course, this is our last day of our fiscal year end, so when you're there, click on the button that says Give Now, because we certainly need to hear from you. We'll talk more about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Could it be that nearly everything we've been told about sexual orientation and gender identity is wrong? A new report published in the journal The New Atlantis seems to challenge conventional secular perspectives on these issues. A paper by Dr. Lawrence Mayer and Dr. Paul McHugh surveys over 200 peer-reviewed studies done on various social disciplines. Ryan Anderson of the Heritage Foundation summarizes the paper's results. He says the major takeaway is that some of the most frequently heard claims about sexuality and gender are not supported by scientific evidence. Here are 4 of the most important conclusions from the paper. First, the belief that sexual orientation is an innate, biologically fixed human property is not supported. In other words, people are not born that way. Second, the belief that gender identity is an innate, fixed human property independent of biological sex, so that a person might be a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body, is not supported by scientific evidence. Third, only a minority of children who express gender atypical thoughts or behavior will continue to do so into adolescence or adulthood. It goes on to say that children should not be encouraged to become transgender. They also should not be subjected to hormone treatments or surgery. Fourth, people who are homosexual or transgender have higher rates of mental problems, anxiety, depression, suicide, as well as behavioral and social problems, substance abuse, and intimate partner violence than the general population. The paper only focuses on the scientific research, but it obviously has implications for public policy. Incorrect scientific claims have been used to justify court rulings, government policies, and medical practices concerning sexual orientation and gender identity. They are not based upon sound science. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Colonel Ellen West, Dr. Merrill Matthews in studio, and if a little bit later you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Colonel West, first of all, in your piece, the Democratic debate kind of went as expected. You say progressive socialism is all about feelings, and emotion and feelings and storytelling were kind of the de rigueur and the kind of the standard philosophy last night, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely so. And you never saw any real, concrete, this is how we pay for this. This is how we implement this. I mean, to include national security policy, foreign policy, their gun control policy, and definitely the economic policy. I mean, all of this stuff, you're going to, get free health care. We're going to have free college education, right down the line. We're going to give illegal immigrants free health care. Okay, so on whose back will that come on? Because there's no such thing as free. So this is that emotional tug. This is that don't you really care? And if you don't care, you're not compassionate argument that they try to make. But the sad thing is that, and we were kind of bantering about this off air, is they make such an angry argument. I mean, if it's one thing to be compassionate and show compassion. I mean, Bill Clinton was really good about this.
Masterful
at it. I feel your pain.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you look at someone like Bernie Sanders is beating the table, or you look at some of the other people that were there really talking about how we're going to mandate certain things, no, that's not how you win people. It does.
Yeah. Dr. Merrill Matthews, one of the things you pointed out here is that several candidates wanted to boldly open the door to socialized medicine. Others wanted to sneak it in the back door.
Right.
But I'll give credit, and it will be a little bit of credit to the moderators who didn't ask tough questions, but they did ask of him, This did not work. A Medicare for all or a single-payer type plan didn't work in California.
Mm-hmm.
They were pretty much handing out IOUs pretty quick. Didn't work in your own state of Vermont and other places. Why do you think it's going to work nationwide? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the California passed it twice back in the mid-2000s, and they thought they were going to try to get Governor Schwarzenegger to veto it, and he did, but it was going to cost about $20 billion, and they passed this right about the time that California, if you remember, Colonel, had to start handing out IOUs because they didn't have any money.
Money. Remember that?
So vendors in California were getting IOUs from the state government, even as they were trying to pass, and the legislature did pass, Schwarzenegger vetoed it, a single-payer system that was going to cost the state $20 billion at the time. Vermont did pass legislation, then they began to look at the cost of it. It wasn't going to, they just couldn't do it. And the biggest issue here, which I don't think any of them understand, is you can't create a single-payer system at the state level. And the reason is a single-payer system has everybody covered. But Medicare is a federal program, so a state can't do anything about Medicare. Period. Nothing. It can say to seniors in that state, you have to have our program plus Medicare, but you can't do anything about Medicare. So if you've got the seniors aren't going to be in the program, all right, well, that's about 15% of the population. Medicaid is a federal state program. States are allowed to add benefits to Medicaid, but they can't change it or take away what the federal government has in there. So you can't change Medicaid. That's going to be about 20% of the population. You've got 160 million Americans, they discussed last night, with private health insurance. About 80 million of them are in what's called self-insured plans. These are largely large companies.
Right.
That's completely under federal law. You cannot change it. A state cannot tell a large company, your health insurance benefits have to do this, that, and the other. Cannot do it. That's under federal law. So you could say we're going to have all these workers have the state plan as well, but why would you do that if Amazon or Apple or Google's in your state, why would you say you can't have that really great insurance, you have to have the state thing instead? You can't do a single payer system in a state. Won't work.
Medicare for all is really not Medicare. And it seemed to me last night and the last two nights, they sort of used that as a phraseology. It's sort of like a focus group name that's come up.
It's a marketing tool.
But it is not really Medicare, is it?
It is not. And that's where Bernie says Medicare is the most popular program in the country, but he's going to eliminate that. Several of the candidates said they're going to do a Medicare buy-in and get there, but a Medicare buy-in means that somebody could buy into the current Medicare program. Medicare is actually fairly expensive. I mean, the average per-person utilization in Medicare is about $11,000 a person. That's a lot of money. Because these are seniors. And they're typically thinking, well, somebody maybe 55 or 60 might want to buy into that, but it's expensive to buy into it. And so the immigrants that they thought who are here who might want to buy into Medicare are not going to be buying into Medicare because most of them don't make much money. Mm-hmm. And we can't say this enough. Obamacare was supposed to fix all these problems.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
I was going to get to Alan West about that.
You could make the case.
How did this problem surface? Yes.
You could make the case in the 90s, as Al Gore did, that we needed a Medicare buy-in, because if you got downsized at age 60 or something like that, you go out and buy health insurance. It's fairly expensive, so maybe that person could have a Medicare buy-in. But you've got health insurance now under Obamacare, which they can't charge you more for a medical condition. They can charge you more for your age. But Obamacare was supposed to solve that problem, and nobody, not one of them, acknowledged the fact that Obamacare is the law of the land. That's the health insurance system that they are railing against, and nobody but Democrats voted for it.
Well, but then that leads to the point. I think that Obamacare was set up to do exactly what is happening. They wanted a failure so that they can say, look, we tried. We need to just go straight to single-payer system. Obamacare was never the thing that they wanted to have as an end-all. They knew that there were going to be loopholes, there were going to be failures. You could drive a train right through. And as a matter of fact, Nancy Pelosi said, we have to pass this thing in order to find out what's in it. That was the most illogical statement that I think anyone made. And now she's Speaker of the House again, but lest I digress. They want to be able to control that part of our economy.
Absolutely.
That's what this is all about.
Wow. Wow. Let me, for just a minute, you were talking about this long list, and this is my short list of things. And Tim Ryan on Wednesday night, who is from Ohio, John Hickenlooper, who, of course, is originally from Colorado, both were saying, if we head down this socialist path, I don't think Democrats are going to do very well, but I'm looking at the short list here. Medicare for all, we just talked about that. Green New Deal, abortion up to the point of birth, and now maybe even after in some places. Free college tuition, guaranteed basic income, we heard that last night. A living wage of $15 an hour, a wealth tax, of course, that was Elizabeth Warren's and others. Government daycare, that was hers as well. And, of course, a couple of others, Kirsten Gillibrand. Forgive student loans, abolish ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, eliminate private health insurance, we just talked about that, end the Electoral College, voting age to 16, some of them were saying, end the filibuster, pack the Supreme Court, reparations, and then reparations for LGBT, legalize illegal immigration. Is that a winning strategy? You run for Congress, and you know what it'd be like to run for the presidency. What about that?
Well, if you are talking to what Vladimir Lenin once called useful idiots, it is a winning strategy. But if you are talking to anyone with a functional brain, no. But that is what they are depending upon is, again, it comes back to that emotional argument.
Emotion, which you write about.
Every single one of those things is emotional based. It's not fact based whatsoever. Look, my oldest daughter just finished PA school, board certified.
Good
My
for her.
youngest daughter will graduate in July from her undergrad. I'm not paying for anybody else's college. Okay?
Good for you.
Those are my daughters. That was my responsibility, and I should plan for it. Never did any of these people mention the 529 plan that you can enroll out there, tax deductible. You can start building a means by which you can pay for your child's education. Because, again, emotional approaches need victims.
Yeah.
And that's not who we are in America.
Well, we're going to take a break, but again, if you'd like to join our conversation, I've been talking today with Alan West and Merrill Matthews, and we come back, I'm going to play some of the comments and get their reaction to Kamala Harris, for example. Got to get those in if I can, and we've got a couple of others that we'll get into. And even they went around a round table and said, what would be the first thing you would do when you get into office? Sounds like a lot of people think climate change is the big issue. But just as we come to a break here, let me encourage you to join with us because we are in the last day of our fiscal year end. And a little bit later, I'll bring in Warren Kelly, but we've been able to get our particular need down to less than $90,000. So we really have made some progress in the last day, but we still need you. So as we've said before, there are probably only about 1% of the entire audience that have ever given a one-time gift to Point of View. So I hope that you will be one of those 99%ers that will actually join with us. A couple of ways you can do so. One, you can go to the website, pointofview.net, click on that button that says Give Now. We have a matching fund. You might also want to consider, if you want to write a check, make sure you make it out to Point of View, Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. But a number of you have been nice enough to call in and make some nice comments about the program, and we have people standing by on the phones, and that number is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. If you value some of the conversation we're having today with Alan West, Merrill Matthews, I know that you would certainly want to make that donation, and we certainly need to hear from you to end our fiscal year in the black and to make it through this summer. So please give us a call, 800-347-5151, or the website, pointofview.net.
Have you ever lost a day? You think it's Thursday, but it's actually Friday? That happened to me this week, and now the week is gone. Well, almost gone, and there's one more thing I need you to do. Go online to pointofview.net or call us and invest in our nation's future. Not long ago, it seemed like every battle in government and culture was a defeat. Now it's a mixed bag with some big wins. We're making progress. Freedom is being given new life. The unborn are getting a bit more protection. Judges are looking to the Constitution, not just their party platform. A new day is dawning, and that means opportunity to help the light shine brighter together with Point of View. To do that, we need to hear from you today. Go to pointofview.net, click on the banner saying Morning in America, or call 800-347-5151. We've got a matching grant that will double whatever you invest. And today is the last day. Stop for just a moment right now and give. Pointofview.net. Click on Morning in America or invest by phone 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again. If you'd like to join our conversation, by the way, 1-800-351-1212. Perhaps you had a chance to watch the debates either Wednesday, June 26th or Thursday, June 27th. But even if you did not, probably one of the things you heard was some of the interchange between Senator Kamala Harris and former Vice President Joe Biden. And this was kind of interesting because Wednesday night, a lot of people thought there would be some comments about Joe Biden. there was some interesting back and forth between Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke, but very little said about him. But last night, that's a little different. And let's, if I can, give you a sense of when Senator Harris decided to take off on Joe Biden.
I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden. I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. That is not true, number one. Number two, if we want to have this campaign litigated on who supports civil rights and whether I did or not, I'm happy to do that. I was a public defender. I didn't become a prosecutor. I came out and I left a good law firm to become a public defender when in fact my city was in flames because of the assassination of Dr. King. Number one. Number two, as the Vice President of the United States, I work with a man who, in fact, we worked very hard to see to it we dealt with these issues in a major, major way. The fact is that in terms of busing, the busing, you would have been able to go to school the same exact way because it was a local decision made by your city council. That's fine. That's one of the things I argued for, that we should be breaking down these lines. But so the bottom line here is, look, everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA.
Right, so again, you get a pretty good idea of the conflict that unfolded. What's the future of Joe Biden and what's the future of Kamala Harris? Of course, that's just one soundbite, but it's a pretty extensive one because I want people to hear it if they did not.
Well, first of all, those moderators did not bring out the fact that Talmadge and all these other guys were Democrat senators.
Somehow they got missed.
As well as Robert Byrd, the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. I think that, once again, Kamala Harris saw that opportunity to make that civil rights issue because she needs to show that I'm the person that can go in and win the black vote. There is no doubt about it. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost in the black community, and Donald Trump had an incredible amount of support for a Republican in the black community. And that support seems to be increasing because of the fact that, the criminal justice reform, because of the fact that you see black unemployment low. So, she's showing that I'm the identity politics candidate here. You cannot go with, I'm sorry, guys, the old white guy in this case. Let me be the one that goes up against the Republican old white guy, and we can win this thing. So that's what you saw happening. And the first night's debate, those folks were just trying to be the VP candidate. Last night's debate was about the people that want to be president.
And to help Joe Biden out here, what he's talking about is federalism. And we have a federalist system here where the federal government is given certain powers under the Constitution, and all powers not directly given to the federal government or for the states or the people. They're left to the states and the people. You may not like that system, but that's the system that we have. And what he was doing was saying that that wasn't something that the federal government was going to do. That was going to be left up to the states and to the cities. Then, and some of them made those choices. Some didn't. I don't remember what the makeup of that was, but she's trying to make it sound like he fought what she did or what she was able to do with busing. But in fact, they left it up as a federalist system, and she was able to be bused under that. And I still support a federalist system, even though some states are going to do some things I don't like. That's why I'm glad I live in Texas. I avoid a lot of those things.
Well, and that's interesting because when you go back and you remember when Barry Goldwater was running, and they said Barry Goldwater voted against the Civil Rights Act. Well, Barry Goldwater he was thinking about the issue of federalism because he said maybe this is not an issue where the federal government should be coming down and telling states what to do. But when you go back, as we were saying, to the emotional
point, yeah.
That's where she got Joe Biden on the emotional point. And too often, that crowd there in Miami was not caring about federalism. You might as well be talking about the planet
That's absolutely
Pluto.
right.
Yeah.
They don't care about federalism. They think everything should come from the federal government.
Yes.
Though, ironically, it was the federal government that imposed so many laws that hurt people like her.
Absolutely.
Some of us have said that maybe Kamala Harris becomes the presidential nominee, and one of the things that might play in her favor, having grown up in California and born in Berkeley, and she was talking about Berkeley as well, is California used to vote in June, but now it votes March 3rd. Here's just a short list of states that will vote March 3rd. Alabama, Arkansas, California, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia. Louisiana picks up a few days later. And if they haven't decided by then, by the 10th, Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, Ohio, Washington. I think it's over by the middle of March. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely right. And I believe that California made that strategic move to shift from later on to bring it into the fact they want to have that early coronation, and they want her to be able to go out there and be their nominee and, transition into the general election phase.
So then the only real question is, like you said, the Wednesday debate, whether or not Julian Castro or Beto O'Rourke do that. And I don't think Beto O'Rourke came off the better of that interchange.
No, absolutely not. And I think that, again, they have to have an image-driven identity politic ticket. And so if you think about all of a sudden, the ticket for the Democrats in 2020 is Kamala Harris and Julian Castro. Yes, far left socialists, absolutely. But what is going to be playing on all the magazines, what's going to be playing on all of the mainstream media is this young, dynamic, beautiful, ticket that we have out there. And then they'll, Donald Trump and Mike Pence. Although the economy will be doing great.
Kind of interesting. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into a couple of other issues. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about this because one of the other issues is this issue of immigration. We had, of course, Representative Dan Crenshaw taking on, and that's one of our articles here, the border funding deniers. Now, eventually, that border funding took place, and then, I guess that's not surprising, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was criticizing the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, because when that other House bill was put forward to the Senate, it didn't even get a hearing, and so they finally decided, well, the one that passed in the Senate, 84-8, probably need to pass. So we'll talk about this issue of immigration, and that also gets us into something else that I just mentioned yesterday, but I'd like to talk about that. Some of the employees of Wayfair were upset. They actually protested the decision by their company to actually send bedroom furniture down to the detention center so that the kids could sleep on it. The argument from the Trump administration is until we get this funding, let's go buy some beds from Wayfair. And these people said, no, because it's Trump. We just don't want to buy beds. We'd rather have the kids sleep on the floor. So I just got to get some comments from some of you around the table here. And if you would like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. See, one of our callers wants to talk about the foreign policy issue. We'll get to that later, but all sorts of issues on the table. And I also, somewhere along the line, want to talk about what would be the first action as president. And you'll have a chance to hear from all 10 of the candidates last night. And not too surprising, but we'll talk about that right after this.
Proposals for single-payer health care depend upon deriving more productivity from a system that is already stretched thin. Medicare for All, which would nationalize the practice of medicine, already has 106 House co-sponsors. Under Medicare for All, doctors would be salaried government employees. Hospitals and other medical facilities would be expected to provide care for all their patients within an allotted, budgeted dollar amount, to be determined annually and capped to keep costs down. The pot of money will also have to cover the extra layers of bureaucracy we'll add to administer the system. This would rely on a resource that, under our current healthcare system, never seems to be depleted: the dedication and professionalism of doctors, nurses, and other medical personnel. Dr. Danielle Offrey, who practices at Bellevue Hospital in New York, says the current corporate system works because most doctors and nurses do the right thing for their patients, even at a high personal cost. In her New York Times op-ed titled "The Business of Healthcare Depends on Exploiting Doctors and Nurses," Dr. Offrey describes how this ethic is being cynically manipulated. Patients everywhere sense that the system is squeezed tight as it's streamlined for greater productivity. But, she writes, one resource that seems endless and free is the professional ethic of medical staff members. This ethic holds the entire enterprise together. If doctors and nurses clocked out when their paid hours were finished, the effect on patients would be calamitous. Today's doctors deal with more chronic conditions and more medical complexity per patient than ever before. Plus, we now have the electronic medical record. Dr. Offrey points out that primary care doctors spend nearly 2 hours typing into the EMR for every 1 hour of direct patient care. Right now, she writes, in healthcare, there is a wondrous elasticity. You can keep adding work, and magically it all somehow gets done. Medicare for All will rely on this quality and stretch it to the breaking point. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of those calls a little bit later. Let me just also mention that maybe in the next hour we will go around to listen to all 10 candidates, what would be the first thing that they would do in the Oval Office. But I thought just before we take a break, one of the issues that has really sort of dominated the news cycle, and we've talked about it from time to time, is are we going to provide any kind of help for what is taking place at the border? And I certainly want to go around the round table because at one point we were saying there's no crisis at the border. Now everybody says there's a crisis at the border. Of course, then you have the picture of the father and daughter that died, drowned. And so there has been a real push to do that. And of course, as I pointed out, this particular piece of legislation finally passed the House of Representatives. It had passed the Senate 84-8. But then for people that are maybe following Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she said, well, this bill was killed in the House. No, it didn't even get 40 senators to attract it. That's when, at this point, Nancy Pelosi said, okay, we better at least pass the same Senate bill or else, again, I won't go into all the basis of that. You'd have to have a conference committee and all those kinds of things. But the bottom line is, finally, help is on the way for the border crisis, which Alan West was about 2 months ago said a manufactured crisis. All of a sudden it became a crisis.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that was their tagline. This was something that Donald Trump created. But as we continue to see more and more reports and numbers, I've been down to the McAllen border sector, and that facility was not made for what we see with this incredible influx. And it's because of a failure of our laws that they don't want to correct. But amazingly so, now that the optics are being, flipped against them, they, decided we got to do something, or else what happens when we go away on this very long Independence Day recess when we're in front of all of our constituents. So her hand was forced in this to make sure that something is done. But again, they just don't want to be able to say that this is a positive for President Trump. They just don't. And what was amazing, again, the emotional thing was amazing. I saw this today earlier. A 2014 interview, Barack Obama with George Stephanopoulos on ABC, where he is telling people, Central American nations, don't send your children to our border. In 2014, that's what Barack Obama says.
Mm-hmm.
But now look at what is happening because of the failure of policies emanating from Washington, D.C.
And I'll just add to that because you mentioned the recess. Back in, I think in 2011, there was a budget crisis going on in the summer. They were coming up to the August break. and Doug Holthagen, former head of the CBO, was asked in testimony, when do you think Congress will actually finally pass a budget? And he said, when it starts eating into their summer break. And as you point out, they're going on the 4th of July recess coming up. So they could have stayed in and worked these things out, but they did.
Nothing is never a crisis until it runs up into a recess period. That's when it becomes a crisis.
As a former member of Congress,
he knows wherever he speaks.
Again, this crisis has then been used by Mayor Pete. And I just at least want to get to that because he said we should call out the hypocrisy of the Republican Party because they clothe themselves in Republican language. And he says a party that associates itself with Christianity say it's okay to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents, that God would condone putting children in cages, has lost all claim to ever use religious language again. I just don't remember hearing anybody say that. Is that a straw man argument, or what am I missing?
It's a weak argument. It is. Pay attention to me because I need some support. I need some help. No one said anything. The whole pictures of children in cages, that was part of the Obama administration, and no one said anything then. So again, this thing of them trying to, claim some moral high ground. Give me a break. The Democrat Party wanted a moral high ground. These are the people that want to kill babies up until their birth. But now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe that they care about children only because it supports their ideological agenda.
It has stunned me that so many people who do not accept the authority of the Bible or the full consistency of it are going to lecture the rest of us about the morality that's being taught in the Bible.
Yeah, but Beelzebub. Beelzebub knows the Bible verses. He knows Scripture, too.
One other question I want to put on the table, and that is Wayfair. This is an online furniture company. Mm-hmm. And again, they weren't necessarily providing furniture under the Obama administration, but I do have the wonder that if indeed the Obama administration bought furniture to actually provide beds for kids in detention centers, that wouldn't be controversial. But what they have done is gone out to Copley Square in Boston, chanting, "This is what democracy looks like. Hey, hey, ho, ho, ICE contracts have to go." And so wanting Wayfair to donate, I guess they are going to donate $100,000 to American Red Cross, but at the same time just frustrated about the fact that their company was providing bedroom furniture and ultimately beds so that the kids in these detention centers would have a bed to sleep on.
Because if the kids have a bed to sleep on, then they don't have the pictures to send. They don't have the optic. And it's that is the greatest hypocrisy that is out there. Here we see a problem. Here's a means by which we rectify it and solve it. No, that means that the person that we hate would get credit for, taking care of it. It's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling.
I when I first heard this story, I thought the reporter must have bungled this story because that surely cannot be what was going on. But in fact, it was what was going on.
Sadly, sometimes we around this table say the phrase, you just can't make this stuff up.
You can't make it up.
And I did for that one. We're coming to a break, and I just thought for just a minute, Colonel Alan West, you have been a supporter of Point of View, and I appreciate that. And Dr. Merrill Matthews, you have been working with me for decades. I mean, I hate to say how long, but you might encourage some of our listeners to consider what they might do to support this ministry.
Well, I have to tell you, I first met you back in December 2014. I just moved here. I think I'd only been here for 5 days. And you opened up the doors to your studio. And this is just an incredible opportunity for Christian constitutional conservatives to talk about the issues from that biblical perspective, not the jaded biblical perspective of, Pete Buttigieg. And this is a forum that we need. And I think that the progressive socialist left would just be doing flips if a place like Point of View was no longer there. So we do need the support of those individuals that are listening under the sound of our voices right now. $10, $20, $25, more if you can, $500, $1,000. But think about the importance of that First Amendment right of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, the right to assemble, the right to petition our government for redress of grievances, and the very first liberty that we have, freedom of religion. That's what Point of View is all about. And it is one thing to talk the talk, but I'm challenging you to walk the walk.
Let me again, just while we have a moment here, encourage those of you to help us out. We really want to empower you to make a difference in the culture. And, of course, you've had a chance to hear from various members of Congress. We've had Van Taylor on. We've had Louis Gohmert. Of course, we have a former member of Congress sitting across from us right now, Dr. Merrill Matthews. When we come back, we're going to be talking about his material on healthcare transparency. We've learned so much about medical issues from him, and even now energy issues. And that's what you're supporting, the kind of news and information and commentary we give you every single day. So let me encourage you to go to the website right now, and it is pointofview.net. You can click on that button that says Give Now. If you'd like to send in a check, make sure you make it out to Point of View and send it to Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Probably the easiest way, if you're near a phone right now, just give us a call. That number is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Take a quick phone call, put it on your credit card, and we'll be back right after this.
Have you ever lost a day? You think it's Thursday, but it's actually Friday? That happened to me this week, and now the week is gone. Well, almost gone, and there's one more thing I need you to do. Go online to pointofview.net or call us and invest in our nation's future. Not long ago, it seemed like every battle in government and culture was a defeat. Now it's a mixed bag with some big wins. We're making progress. Freedom is being given new life. The unborn are getting a bit more protection. Judges are looking to the Constitution, not just their party platform. A new day is dawning, and that means opportunity to help the light shine brighter together with Point of View. To do that, we need to hear from you today. Go to pointofview.net, click on the banner saying Morning in America, or call 800-347-5151. We've got a matching grant that will double whatever you invest. And today is the last day. Stop for just a moment right now and give. Pointofview.net, click on Morning in America, or invest by phone 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information. about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Continue your conversation today. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Colonel Alan West and Dr. Merrill Matthews. And, you know, guys, one of the things that I thought might have been a pretty good question was to say, what would be the first thing that you would do in office? And the argument is that, sure, Barack Obama wanted to do a lot of things, but he made his first focus on the issue of what became to be known as the Affordable Care Act. So I thought that was a pretty good question. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it might be good to go around. There were 10 individuals last night answering that question, and I'll try to remind you if we get into one of their comments who said what, because you have some of these people that are well known, like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Kirsten Gillibrand, at least in Bernie Sanders. You have some people like Marianne Williamson, who, you know, of course, in Miracles, Andrew Yang, maybe people don't know Michael Bennett as well. So we'll get into that, but let's, if we can, just hear the way in which they answer that very important question.
I'm going to go down the line here, and I'm asking you, please, for one or two words only. All right? Please.
Really?
President Obama in his first year wanted to address both health care and climate. And he could only get one signature issue accomplished. It was, obviously, health care. He didn't get to do climate change. You may only get one shot, and your first issue that you're going to push, you get one shot that it may be the only thing you get passed. What is that first issue for your presidency? Eric Swalwell, you're first.
For Parkland, for Orlando, for every community affected by gun violence, ending gun violence.
Senator Bennett.
Climate change and the lack of economic mobility Bernie talks about.
Senator Gillibrand.
Passing a family bill of rights that includes a national paid leave plan, universal pre-K, affordable daycare, and making sure that women and families can thrive in the workplace no matter who they are.
Oh, I like that.
That was pretty good. Senator Harris.
Then. So passing a middle class and working families tax cut,
That's one.
DACA, guns.
Okay. I'm giving you credit for the first thing you said, the tax cut. I got you. Senator Sanders, first thing.
The premise that there's only one or two issues out there. This
I'm not saying there isn't one or two.
Enormous crises.
Senator Sanders.
We need a political revolution. People have got to stand up and take on the special interests. We can transform this country.
Fine. Vice President Biden, your first issue, Mr. Vice President.
I think you're so underestimating what Barack Obama did. He's the first man to bring together the entire world, 196 nations, to commit to deal with climate change immediately. So I don't buy that. But the first thing I would do is make sure that we defeat Donald Trump.
Okay.
Period.
Mayor Buttigieg, your first priority, your first issue as president that you were going to block and tackle.
We've got to fix our democracy before it's too late. Get that right. Climate, immigration, taxes, and every other issue gets better.
Mr. Yang.
I would pass a $1,000 freedom dividend for every American adult starting at age 18, which would speed us up on climate change, because if you get the boot off of people's throats, they'll focus on climate change much more clearly.
Governor Hickenlooper?
I would do a collaborative approach to climate change, and I would pronounce it well before the election to make sure we don't re-elect the worst president in American history.
And Ms. Williamson with the last word.
My first call is to Prime Minister of New Zealand.
who said that her goal is to make New Zealand the place where it's the best place in the world for a child to grow up. And I will tell her girlfriend you were so on, because the United States of America is going to be the best place in the world for a child to grow up.
Ms. Williamson, thank you. You guys were close with the short, at least it was shorter.
Yeah, well, again, a lot of them were climate change. Here's my booklet on climate change if you didn't get a chance to do that. But gun control, calling New Zealand, a variety of other things.
Revolution? Revolution?
Yeah, revolution. Let's go around the round table. Some of the comments.
Revolution. Well, look, when we talk about climate change, we were just laughing about this off air. When I was a kid growing up in Atlanta, Georgia, everyone told me that I was going to freeze to death. Now everyone's telling me that as an adult, I'm going to sweat to death. So I'm just trying to figure out which one is it? Because to me, it is nonsensical. This is a huge global wealth redistribution scheme. And think about how the French reacted when Emmanuel Macron said that we're going to raise the gas tax as part of the climate accords. They took to the streets and they rioted. These are the French that don't even want the Paris climate change accord. So, 150, 200 years, 1 degree? Come on.
Yeah. Dr. Merrill Matthews, you've studied this. You've always been our go-to expert on healthcare, and we're going to get to that in just a minute, but you become quite the expert on energy, and you've looked at this whole issue of the Green New Deal and climate change. What are your thoughts?
It's impossible to do what they want to do, and you don't need to do it anyway. The climate has been warming since a gradual warming trend since the last ice age. That was going on. Nobody accuses cars and carbon release of being the reason for we're no longer in an ice age. There is a fair question as to whether or not humans are exacerbating the warming. That's a fair question.
Yeah, that's a fair question.
But we've been on a gradual warming trend, and we may continue, or we may move to a mini ice age, or we may move to a long ice age. We don't know. We just don't know what we don't know about this, and this gets us back to the issue of when one of them said in the debates, we cannot deny climate science. It is not science you're questioning. It is some of the climate models that you're questioning, because that's where they get these predictions about things that are going to happen.
And again, part of the point that you are making is climate's change. We had a Roman warming period. We had a medieval warming period. Remember your geography, you have ice in Greenland and no ice in Iceland. There was a time when there was not much ice in Greenland, and that's why the Vikings flourished as much as they did. They used to grow grapes in England and have wine in England, not just France. So some of this has happened for a long time. The example I use in the book is there is this one city, or more of a town in Belgium, used to be a seaport town, and now is 10 miles away from the coast. But eventually, if the sea level comes up a little bit, it might be back where it was in the past. And when Al Gore predicted that the sea levels would rise 20 feet, he's off by about 20 feet, right? And
he predicted around 2006, based upon, I think, a German climate scientist, that by 2012 there would be no snow. We got lots of snow. It's just bizarre. And I'll just add one more thing about the hypocrisy here. I would suspect most of the major candidates on that stage flew there in private jets.
Oh, I'm sure.
Bernie was first class. There's a photo of him.
Yeah.
But they most of them will take private jets, and then a limousine will pick them up and take them there. It is everybody else they want to live by those restrictions on carbon usage, not themselves.
And we've talked about that before. Sometimes one of the things I say in terms of discernment, see what they do, not what they say. I mean, there are liberals that say that college is a rape culture. As Dennis Prager points out, but they still send their girls and their daughters to college. And they are people that say that this is an existential threat, and they have a carbon footprint that's anywhere from 2 to 10 times larger than ours.
In the old Soviet Union, they had the Politburo. Everyone above the cut line, and everyone else below it.
We're going to take a break. We got a lot more to cover. We will do so right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Could it be that nearly everything we've been told about sexual orientation and gender identity is wrong? A new report published in the journal The New Atlantis seems to challenge conventional secular perspectives on these issues. A paper by Dr. Lawrence Mayer and Dr. Paul McHugh surveys over 200 peer-reviewed studies done on various social disciplines. Ryan Anderson of the Heritage Foundation summarizes the paper's results. He says the major takeaway is that some of the most frequently heard claims about sexuality and gender are not supported by scientific evidence. Here are 4 of the most important conclusions from the paper. First, the belief that sexual orientation is an innate, biologically fixed human property is not supported. In other words, people are not born that way. Second, the belief that gender identity is an innate, fixed human property independent of biological sex, so that a person might be a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body, is not supported by scientific evidence. Third, only a minority of children who express gender atypical thoughts or behavior will continue to do so into adolescence or adulthood. It goes on to say that children should not be encouraged to become transgender. They also should not be subjected to hormone treatments or surgery. Fourth, people who are homosexual or transgender have higher rates of mental problems, anxiety, depression, suicide, as well as behavioral and social problems, substance abuse, and intimate partner violence than the general population. The paper only focuses on the scientific research, but it obviously has implications for public policy. Incorrect scientific claims have been used to justify court rulings, government policies, and medical practices concerning sexual orientation and gender identity. They are not based upon sound science. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Haven't talked about foreign policy, and since I have Colonel Alan West in here, and one of our callers wants to talk about that rush to war comment, a lot of that gets to this issue, and that is the argument that I'm hearing, Colonel Alan West, is that the reason we've had this belligerence from Iran is because the Trump administration withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action known as the Iran nuclear deal, or that maybe Iran's not even our enemy. And I keep trying to remind our listeners, how about 52 Americans held hostage for 440 days? Or let's maybe talk about over 300 Marines killed in their beds.
November 1983, Beirut.
Operation Praying Mantis under Reagan,
Yep.
or even the more recent statements by the Pentagon saying that they say that Iran was directly responsible for the deaths of at least 600 U.S. soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just this argument that's being used right now that this is a dangerous man in the White House, and there's a rush to war with Iran. And if anything, I think you saw the other day Donald Trump saying losing lives of 150 people. Let's just cancel that for now. I don't know if that was a blink or whether that was a bluff, but I don't see us rushing to war. What do you see?
No, we're not rushing to war. This is a fear-mongering tactic from the left, just the same as we remember the advertisement that was run against Barry Goldwater showing the nuclear mushroom cloud. Iran does not want to have nuclear war. Iran wants to be a nuisance to us. Iran wants to expand their regional hegemonic dominance in the Middle East, which is what they were able to do under the Obama administration. You're not going to see under the Trump administration Americans being held at gunpoint on their knees on riverine assault boats. And when you go back and you talk about Operation Praying Mantis, that was an Iranian mine that hit a U.S. warship. It did not sink it, but it was towed into harbor. But 4 days later, in April of 1988, Ronald Reagan launched what was the largest naval engagement, surface engagement since World War II. And they sunk several Iranian ships, and they
about half their navy.
Yeah, half their navy, and took out their oil platforms. And guess what? We never had a war with Iran, but we responded in what he felt was proportionally to what they were doing in mining that area. So, again, why would we want to have relations with the number one state sponsor of Islamic terrorism? I spent some time in Iraq and also in Afghanistan, as folks well know. 18 to 20% of the soldiers that were killed and wounded in Iraq were because of explosive force penetrators, a very lethal improvised explosive device that Iran developed and gave to the terrorists in Iraq. So at some point in time, we're going to have to take a position of strength against Iran. Doesn't mean that we want to take over the country, but we have to reduce their sphere of influence in the Middle East, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Iraq now. So, and Venezuela.
For sure. Let's go to some phone calls. David in California, I think you wanted to address that comment about a rush to war in the debate. What's your thoughts?
Oh, well, thank you, Kirby, and your guests. A couple of different angles on it. Right now on C-SPAN, they're running the Senate vote on it, and it looks like it'll be down to Pence to break the tie because it's at 40-60. And it's interesting. What was it, just a couple of months ago when when the Saudi Arabians were bombing Yemen so murderously that they had the cholera epidemic and 700,000 children are dying, and U.S. military weapons were keeping the situation going. So the entire Senate, the entire House, Republicans, Democrats, voted to stop the arms sales to Saudi Arabia. So all of a sudden, Mr. Bonesaw decides to cry to Trump and Jared, and he's getting his arms back by their having this fake national emergency against Iran. And since Saudi Arabia would be our partner in any problems with Iran, we get to shift arms over to Saudis again in violation of this arms embargo. So I was interested in the Colonel's angle on that, whether he wants to see fake arms sales in the name of murdering Yemenis to Mr. Bonesaw.
Well, I didn't too much care for the fact that President Obama, outsourced our military capability and capacity to Islamic jihadists in Libya. But he didn't ask for any type of congressional approval, and he went past the War Powers Act. So let's be honest with what is happening out there. And, of course, everyone wants to demonize Ronald Reagan for what he did with Iran and the Iran-Contra, but now they're coming back and they say they want to be, friendly with Iran. So I have never cared for the Saudis, flat out, because of their complicity in, 9/11. And I think that what is happening between Saudi and the Houthi rebels, which are Iranian-backed, is a Saudi issue, but also that has some long-term strategic ramifications for the United States of America in the Middle East. So I believe that what we should be doing is looking at how can we reduce the capability and capacity of Iran to be able to have that hegemonic expansion. And the most important thing are the economic sanctions. Because right now, Hezbollah, I've been reading reports, Hezbollah is begging for money in Tehran. And that's what I like. I don't want jihadists to be able to go to Iran and say, hey, can you write me another check? And they're happy and willing to do that. And I don't want the United States of America being part of that. The fact that we laundered pallets of cash to send to the number one state sponsor of Islamic terrorism, to me, that's a very heinous thing. That's not a good foreign policy interest of ours.
One of the things I say sometimes is that people say, well, that's partisan. Well, the last time I looked, the two presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, both said that Iran was state-sponsored terrorism. So sometimes people want to divide parties on that. And that's one time where I think you've had pretty much agreement and unanimity.
Well, President Trump did not respond militarily, even though there was reports that they were getting ready to. But apparently he did respond with a cyber war, a cyber attack.
Yes,
that we've read about. We don't know the details on that, but we understand that was, and that's exactly what I would expect him to do. Secondly, Israel for a while has been wanting to go in and do some surgical strikes in Iran. I think the Obama administration said, don't do that. We don't want you doing something like that with our big partner in Iran. It would not surprise me if a green light wasn't given to Israel, not immediately, somewhere down the line, so that there's plausible deniability, and we may see Israel go in and do some of this damage that we don't want to do ourselves.
Something that Israel did in Syria.
Yes.
To a little nuclear, facility.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For sure. What's the danger of Iran having a nuclear weapon? Can you speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these are people that are delusional, and it is not that they would use it, but as with the EFPs, they'll give it to any terrorist organization to use. And there is a collusion out there between North Korea and Iran as far as the technology and the weapon systems, mating those two things together. And, Iran is also in bed with Russia and China. And so there is a new axis of evil that is coming together, and we need to strategically be able to combat that.
Yes. And we have talked about even some of the prophetic issues. We've had Craig Parshall on there just talking about the fact that Iran are Shiite, not Sunni. So in some respects, they're different. And also because of that, some of them are actually 12ers, not the current leader, but Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was certainly that case. But certainly there are some people that even believe a nuclear confrontation will usher in this
the return of the Mahdi.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's right.
Yes.
So those are things that maybe people in the State Department don't think about, because for them, religion's not important. For those around the table, we recognize how religion is not just an excuse. It may be a very significant motivating factor.
And it drives a theocratic regime.
And that's another point, in these Shiite regimes, you don't have a separation of mosque and state. It all comes together. The Ayatollahs and Imams run the show.
But we should at least mention that the ones who run Iran, and I think the vast majority of the people in Iran, are on two different wavelengths.
Oh, I think the people are Western, really would love to
and
have
very
them.
young.
Yes, very
they
young.
Have a
and
very young population.
Pro-Western.
Yes.
Very good. Well, we need to take a break. We have got a lot more to cover. And when we come back, Dr. Merrill Matthews has written a very good piece about this idea of healthcare transparency, healthcare price transparency. So we'll get into that. But as we go to a break, down to the last day, down to the last few hours. So if you have been waiting, and I know some of you tend to procrastinate, now's the time to take some action. So go to our website, pointofview.net. It says Morning in America. Click on the button that says Give Now. Or if you'd like to give someone a call, that's a different number, 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. As we point out, we have a matching grant, so your gift of $50 becomes $100, $100 becomes $200. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about a couple of other issues in the Trump administration that have not been mentioned, and all that comes up right after this.
Have you ever lost a day? You think it's Thursday, but it's actually Friday? That happened to me this week, and now the week is gone. Well, almost gone, and there's one more thing I need you to do. Go online to pointofview.net or call us and invest in our nation's future. Not long ago, it seemed like every battle in government and culture was a defeat. Now it's a mixed bag with some big wins. We're making progress. Freedom is being given new life. The unborn are getting a bit more protection. Judges are looking to the Constitution, not just their party platform. A new day is dawning, and that means opportunity to help the light shine brighter together with Point of View. To do that, we need to hear from you today. Go to pointofview.net, click on the banner saying Morning in America, or call 800-347-5151. We've got a matching grant that will double whatever you invest. And today is the last day. Stop for just a moment right now and give. Pointofview.net, click on Morning in America, or invest by phone 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Colonel Alan West, Dr. Merrill Matthews, but we also brought into the studio the president of Point of View, Warren Kelly, and we are actually in the last few hours of our fiscal year end, because technically it ends on Sunday, but if people want to give, today is the last day. So how we doing?
Today is the last business day, so this is when we close the book. So this is it. We have until midnight tonight, and we still have a good ways to go, a pretty good hill. You mentioned, I think, earlier that the beginning of the show we were at about $85,000 that we still need to raise, or $89,000. We're now at about $79,000. So we've had about 10,000 come in during the show, but that's still a big number we need to clear out. So we really need to hear from you.
We've used the phrase before and the numbers before that only about 1% or maybe even less of all of our listeners actually even have ever sent in a gift. And even with those numbers, I suspect you probably see some names you've seen before. So we're really talking about a number of people that maybe have been listening to this program for years, maybe even decades, that have never given.
That's very true. We've seen a few people that have given for the first time this week, but very few, actually. And so there are a lot of you out there that have benefited from the show for many years. You love what we're doing. It's time for you to let us know that. It's time for you to stand with us. We need to hear from you.
So again, that is very easy to do. You can go to the website, pointofview.net, even as you're listening to some of the conversation. And Colonel Alan West, you've been very good about encouraging people to go out there and make a pledge and to give a gift.
Yeah, I remember one time I used some phraseology that Warren kind of got a little upset with, so I won't use that again.
I regret telling you that.
But, I will try to rephrase it in a different way. Look, if a show like Point of View goes away, there will be massive celebration on the left. We cannot allow that to happen. It's bad enough that we have to fight every single day to keep our voices out there in the public space. But if we lose a voice because we didn't support it ourselves, shame on us. And so if you're listening right now, do something. I mean, I think it was Sir Edmund Burke that said, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. So if you're listening and doing nothing, come on, look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, am I living up to the things that I believe in? So just do the right thing.
Again, website, pointofview.net. And again, if you'd like to talk to someone, the off-air line, the one that you can talk to someone and put on your credit card, 800-347-5151. And Warren, we're still taking phone calls, and even sometimes you take a phone call.
Occasionally, even I step in and help with the phones. But yes, we will have the phones open. Even after the show goes off the air, we'll have the phones open, people available to take your call. Please let us hear from you. We got a big hill, and we need your help.
We certainly do. We have some comments that people want to make about health care. And before we do that, Dr. Merrill Matthews, you have a piece that we've posted. I think it's our second article here. Health care price transparency won't take off until patients rather than the government demand it. Of course, that's something that the Trump administration's talked about. And I use the example of Stephen Moore's been on with us before, and you know him very well, who had to get a rotator cuff surgery. Warren knows all about that. And said, doctor, if I have the surgery, about how much will it cost? And the doctor looked panicked and said, Steve, I've been doing these surgeries for 20 years. You're the first patient to ever ask me what it costs. And then laughed and says, I don't even know how much it costs. I would go into a restaurant. I'm going to take some friends out tonight that are missionaries. When I go in the restaurant, I'll have a pretty good idea of what it will cost me to take these missionaries out. I go into a doctor's office. Lots of times I don't have a clue.
That's right. And what's happened is that President Trump has signed an executive order to try to encourage more price transparency in healthcare. He wants people to be able to know when they go to the doctor's office, when they go to the hospital, roughly how much that's going to cost. I don't disagree with that at all. We've been pushing for price transparency for some time, but price transparency is available in every other sector of the economy. When you go to the grocery store, when you go to the pharmacy, you can walk in the pharmacy and you walk past all these over-the-counter drugs with prices there, sales and everything. When you go to the pharmacist, it's not clear how much the drug's going to cost. And that's because in the vast majority of cases, when somebody goes into the hospital, when they go to the pharmacy, when they go to the doctor, a third party is paying the bill. So most of us don't really care how much something costs. And my point in the piece is that it's good to have price transparency, but the way you're really going to get it is when individuals are demanding that because they want to be value-conscious shoppers in the healthcare marketplace. We were moving in that direction some with health savings accounts. We were trying to get in that direction. Obamacare comes in and sort of messes this up completely, puts even more insulation of people between the doctor and the prices and so forth. And so it's going to be very, very hard to untangle this.
Competition and price transparency, I would think, Alan West, is kind of something that we take for granted in every other sector of society, but not medicine.
No, you're absolutely right, and that is the thing. I mean, I remember back in the day when the insurance guy would come around to your house, and he'd have his book, and he'd open the book, and he'd show you exactly, what you had to pay. And, you're right. You go in to the dentist's office or whatever, and they tell you, okay, this is what it's going to be to, do this filling or whatever. But as we have allowed those insurance companies to come in, we just become lazy and we've just become complacent. And I think that is one of the big problems in our country is a lack of individual responsibility. We have transferred our individual responsibility over to government or to the insurance companies or whatever, and then we just kind of sit back and say, someone else will take care of it. And as you cede over that ability, then they end up taking over your lives.
And I have people tell me, well, it just doesn't work in healthcare. But it does work in healthcare. If you go for cosmetic surgery, so you're going to get an eye tuck or something, they're going to say, the doctor will give you a flat price. You can go down the street to another doctor and compare that. Right. That price will include the anesthetist or whoever there are. It includes everything. If you go and get LASIK eye surgery, they will give you a price, and they even have sales, and it even really some of them
competition
at least used to really cater to consumers and trying to go out and get them. May have cars come pick them up and bring them in. They do various things because in most cases insurance isn't paying for those things. Individuals are paying for it, so the healthcare providers cater to the customer, and that's what we need in healthcare again. And there's actually a small group of doctors out there, direct pay, small group of hospitals that do exactly that. They list the price. The prices are significantly lower than most doctors and hospitals would charge. It can happen, but it's not going to happen until we change the way the system works.
And that's the great thing. Health savings accounts came along, tax deductible money. You could, sequester away for you to take care of yourself, your own routine medical, procedures, not the major, catastrophic procedures. But you're right. When Obamacare comes along, it gets rid of it. It penalizes people for having these things that really was about individual and personal responsibility in the healthcare space.
Wow. Let's take some phone calls, and we'll go to Texas KCTA. Susan, I think you want to talk about Medicare for All. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thanks. I was seeing yet another inconsistency. I studied years ago under a really good Christian financial counselor named Larry Burkett.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure.
He noticed this years ago that Medicare is a pyramid structure. And at the time, it was already kind of bad because someone that had just retired and was going to use the Medicare funds was being paid for by the next person who was younger and was working. Mm-hmm. And then it got to where that next person had to be 2 or 3 people to pay for the first one. You know, it was a
it's like Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, as the so-called entitlements. They are really. Oh, go ahead.
Well, Social Security used to have roughly 16 people for every retiree. Yeah. Now we're down to around 3-ish, I think, or maybe 2.5, something like that. And it's getting, before long, it's going to be, I'll have a retiree. I'm paying for one retiree. So that's exactly right. And that's one of the reasons why both Social Security and Medicare are unsustainable. When you put the two programs together and you ask what are the long-term unfunded liabilities for those programs, and by unfunded liabilities, it means money that they expect they're going to have to pay out and not get back in. We're well around $100 trillion now, so it's a lot of money.
Well, and again, you've written a book on that subject, haven't you?
We did. The Entitlements Cliff. It's called On the Edge, the Facing the Entitlements Crisis, and it highlights some of the problems that we're facing out there. And Larry Burkett is absolutely right.
I would think so. When we come back from the break, we're going to hear briefly from Michelle Bachmann, because she'll be with us on Monday, but we might even ask a former member of Congress if we're going to ever balance the budget. We are going to have to deal with entitlements, aren't we? And that's back to your book. So we have a lot more to cover. We'll do that right after this.
Proposals for single-payer health care depend upon deriving more productivity from a system that is already stretched thin. Medicare for All, which would nationalize the practice of medicine, already has 106 House co-sponsors. Under Medicare for All, doctors would be salaried government employees. Hospitals and other medical facilities would be expected to provide care for all their patients within an allotted, budgeted dollar amount, to be determined annually and capped to keep costs down. The pot of money will also have to cover the extra layers of bureaucracy we'll add to administer the system. This would rely on a resource that, under our current healthcare system, never seems to be depleted: the dedication and professionalism of doctors, nurses, and other medical personnel. Dr. Danielle Offrey, who practices at Bellevue Hospital in New York, says the current corporate system works because most doctors and nurses do the right thing for their patients, even at a high personal cost. In her New York Times op-ed titled "The Business of Healthcare Depends on Exploiting Doctors and Nurses," Dr. Offrey describes how this ethic is being cynically manipulated. Patients everywhere sense that the system is squeezed tight as it's streamlined for greater productivity. But, she writes, one resource that seems endless and free is the professional ethic of medical staff members. This ethic holds the entire enterprise together. If doctors and nurses clocked out when their paid hours were finished, the effect on patients would be calamitous. Today's doctors deal with more chronic conditions and more medical complexity per patient than ever before. Plus, we now have the electronic medical record. Dr. Offrey points out that primary care doctors spend nearly 2 hours typing into the EMR for every 1 hour of direct patient care. Right now, she writes, in healthcare, there is a wondrous elasticity. You can keep adding work, and magically it all somehow gets done. Medicare for All will rely on this quality and stretch it to the breaking point. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hi, my name is Michelle Bachmann, and I'm excited to talk to you about Point of View Radio. Point of View has been keeping listeners informed on issues related to faith, family, and freedom for over 45 years. And Kerby Anderson is someone you can trust to apply a biblical worldview to these issues. From matters of politics and world events to those of theology, Christian living, and culture, Kerby and the team at Point of View work to help you make sense of the ever-changing world around us. And speaking personally, I'm thankful for the influence Point of View has had on me.
So again, Michelle Bachmann be with us on Monday. First started listening to the program when she was dating a man who later became her husband at the age of 19. They'd made a point of listening to Marlon Maddox back then, and then later I remember Penna Dexter and I were interviewing her as a homemaker before she ever ran for the state legislature and then before she ran for Congress. So just a good opportunity.
But you know what you mentioned there is an important point, because you and I have been in talk radio for a while, and we've seen an awful lot of programs come and go. Point of View's been around for 45 years, hasn't there? More, a little more.
Yeah, since 1972. So that is the case. Just for a second, I'd like to go around the round table just to get a thought about this idea of entitlements. Of course, Dr. Merrill Matthews has written a book on the cliff, and we have the need for the fact that Congress just never seems to address, nor do any of the presidential candidates. I didn't see any one of the 20 talk about the fact that we're $22 trillion worth of debt, and we're going to pay for more of it, and we're going to give free college tuition. Dr. Merrill Matthews and Colonel Allen West, how do we deal with that?
Well, again, it comes to telling the truth to the American people, and the American people accepting the truth. What Dr. Matthews, Merrill talked about is exactly right. The unfunded mandates and liabilities that we have, our debt is really $100 trillion. When you look at the budget pie of the United States of America, you got mandatory spending side and discretionary spending side. And on discretionary, you have non-defense and defense. The mandatory spending side is at 66% of what we are spending, and that's really what is sucking up all the oxygen. And so you're going to get to the point where you're going to have to borrow to cover your defense discretionary spending. And wouldn't that be shame that we'd have to go to China or someone else to borrow money to keep our military operating? So at some point in time, we have to look at Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the net interest on the debt and say, how do we fix these programs? But as soon as you say that, the American people say, oh, no, don't go to it. That's the commercial ad that nobody wants to have. So when we talk about expanding Medicaid in states, that means we're going to put more people on a health care program that was meant for at or below a poverty level. Why would you want to do that? And so economic growth is what we need to have, so we get people out of these poverty programs and things of this nature so that we can reduce the dependence on the on the mandatory spending side. We have to get that. And you're right. Social Security is, it's going to be one for one.
I'm seeing stories because if they don't come to a budget deal, the sequester kicks in, and you may have been in Congress when they passed the sequester. It was the first time we've actually sort of instead of just slowing the rate of growth, we actually were making some cuts in spending. And since y'all passed that, Republicans and Democrats have been looking for ways to get around it ever since.
And they continue to overspend.
And And it seems like the one thing from what I'm seeing in the news stories is that both Republicans and Democrats don't want to do is have the sequester kick in again. Whereas I'm kind of good with the sequester kicking in.
Well, the only problem I saw with the sequester is that it unfairly went after our defense discretionary budget.
Yeah, it did.
And I think deep down inside, Barack Obama knew that would happen. And I remember being in John Boehner's office when he was the speaker and saying, Mr. Speaker, I got relatives, I got friends that are still in uniform. Tell me that this is not going to kick in and degrade our military capability and capacity. And, Boehner, come on, Wes, we're not going to do that. Everything will be fine. Yeah, right. Okay. And look what happened.
That's for sure. If you'd like to read more, in your Kindle edition of On the Edge, America Faces the Entitlement Cliff, and you are the co-author of that, and we have information about that on our website, pointofview.net. And, of course, that's a place where your gift can come as well. But let me go around the round table one more time. Colonel Allen West, any thoughts about, we've now heard from 20 of these Democratic candidates. One of them is probably going to be the candidate. Who do you think it might be? What kind of issues do you think might show up in the campaign? Any thoughts?
Well, once again, I think, and I've seen this for quite some time, Kamala Harris is the person that they want to have on that stage against Donald Trump. And then I think the two people that you saw vying to be that vice presidential nominee were O'Rourke and Castro, because they want to put Texas in play. That's the winning ticket for them. But the song is going to continue on. I mean, how much more can you say we're going to give you free stuff? I mean, so we don't need another debate with these chuckleheads. Let's just move on.
Well, as I say in the piece that I have up on IPI.org, Elizabeth Warren, I think, got some of her mojo back. I say she's on the warpath, which you would expect from...
You got us all on that one.
So 3 or 4 years ago, she was sort of the progressives' dream candidate.
Yeah.
And they kind of wanted her instead of Hillary Clinton. She and Harry Reid, I think, gave her a deal, saying we're going to put you in leadership in the Senate if you won't go against Harry Reid's favorite candidate, being Hillary Clinton. So, and I tend to agree with that. I think Kamala Harris probably checks all the boxes, and my sense is that Democrats now, especially the younger people who are leading this charge, really want a victim in there, somebody who can claim victimhood. It's going to be hard for Joe Biden to claim that. Mayor Pete could claim a little bit by being gay. I mean, that can be something of a victim, but I suspect Kamala is the one they'd like to be able to go. And if she keeps up with the performance she had last night, she may very well be the candidate.
And that's the thing, Elizabeth Warren brings some baggage with her because her credibility.
She used to be a Republican.
Yeah, and the fact that she talks about, the high cost of, college education, yet she was getting, $200,000 for teaching one class in college. So come on, give me a break. Yeah. They're looking for someone that checks the boxes. They're looking for someone that gives that incredible visual, image-driven contrast with Donald Trump. And, Mayor Pete, he could play a victim, but except for one thing, they need the black vote. And it's going to be really tough. You're shaking your head. It's going to be really tough to take him into, a black church because that's going to put black pastors in a very bad situation. Remember, the same-sex marriage proposals in 2008, California and Florida, both failed. Even though you drove out incredible amounts of black voters, they both failed. Why? Because there's still traditional values in the black community.
That's for sure. Well, I just appreciate both of you for coming and joining us for our last day of our fiscal year. And so, again, don't forget, we have authors of both these books, and we have information about that, of the book by Colonel Allen West, as well as the most recent one mentioned by Dr. Merrill Matthews. But just before I run out of time, let me just mention that we have come to the end. And if you've waited to the end, this is it. So please take the time to visit the website, pointofview.net. Even though we're going off the air, of course, you can click on that button that says Give Now. And as Warren Kelly said, we're going to count those up till midnight tonight. If you would like to talk to someone, even though we go off the air in less than a minute, you can call that number 800-347-5151. Let me mention it again, 800-347-5151. Someone said the other day, I'm glad you repeat it because when I'm driving, I don't have a chance to write it down. Then I finally got home and I could write it down. So 800-347-5151. If you'd like to write a check, I'd encourage you to write it and take it to the mailbox right now. And again, you can send it to Point of View, Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. Next week, we have a lot of really good programs, and starting off with, of course, Michelle Bachmann on Monday. So that's going to be a great opportunity. Hope you enjoy the weekend. Visit the website, pointofview.net. I want to thank Andrew and Connor and Steve for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Have you ever lost a day? You think it's Thursday, but it's actually Friday. That happened to me this week, and now the week is gone. Well, almost gone, and there's one more thing I need you to do. Go online to pointofview.net or call us and invest in our nation's future. Not long ago, it seemed like every battle in government and culture was a defeat. Now it's a mixed bag with some big wins. We're making progress. Freedom is being given new life. The unborn are getting a bit more protection. Judges are looking to the Constitution, not just their party platform. A new day is dawning, and that means opportunity to help the light shine brighter together with Point of View. To do that, we need to hear from you today. Go to pointofview.net, click on the banner saying Morning in America, or call 800-347-5151. We've got a matching grant that will double whatever you invest. And today is the last day. Stop for just a moment right now and give. Pointofview.net, click on Morning in America, or invest by phone 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.